and always will, is about moving humanity forward. And remember, folks, every act of kindness is a little love we leave behind. Hey, folks, the man with the pinky ring and the New York thing, forget about it. Bad Brad Berkwitt. And you're watching another episode of the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show on the Ringside Report web TV channel. Now make sure you follow me as well on Twitter at BadBradRSR. Again, that's at BadBradRSR. And check out my great writing team, lots of diversity, on ringsidereport.com. I'm so proud of the work that they're doing for the resistance, for world news, entertainment, sports, and we have it all, and I have a great team. As well, check out my Moving Humanity Forward panels, which is below the playlist for the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show, okay? Because I've got 5 in the can and many more coming. A lot of people have been thoroughly enjoying them, and I greatly appreciate, and I'm humbled by all the comments on the videos and people that contact me via DM and other ways on how you're being moved by the people that I'm having on these Moving Humanity Forward panels. So thank you so very much. All right, today I have a returning guest. Does that sound like kind of Jeopardy? This country is in jeopardy, and we need this gentleman even more today to talk some hot topics. He is the host of the popular podcast, Justice Matters, and baby, it matters. He is the one, the only returning guest, Glenn Kirschner. Forget about it. Well, I almost feel like you're a returning Jeopardy, which we are in Jeopardy, player, but I'm not Ken Jennings. And we won't say take 500, a category for 500, but hey, good afternoon and welcome back, Glenn.
Hey, great to be with you, Brad.
Let's jump right into it. Some talking points. People are curious. They want to know and want to get your take on it. First one, new reporting that shows Trump is under criminal investigation with the DOJ.
So, and there's been a lot of back and forth about whether we can officially declare Donald Trump is under criminal investigation. I think people should know how the grand jury works. For decades, I spent so much time in the grand jury in Washington, D.C. In the grand jury, we investigate crime. So, for example, when the insurrection happened on January 6th, federal prosecutors would have opened the grand jury. It's called a grand jury original. What that means is there's been no arrest yet. It's a wide open investigation in the grand jury. And here's what we call it. We call it in re possible violation of 18 United States Code 2380. I can actually pull out the code section. Whatever the code section is for insurrection. In re possible violation of that criminal code. Then we investigate broadly. We try to bring in everybody who has any information about what happened on January 6th. So we don't investigate a person, we investigate a crime. Here's the thing, as your investigation progresses, it becomes pretty damn clear who's responsible for the insurrection. So what have we seen? We've seen the grand jury investigation morph and reach a point where they are focusing on Donald Trump. And we know this courtesy of some great reporting by Carol Leonnig of the Washington Post, and there are a bunch of others on that byline. She's obviously talking to the witnesses because she is reporting the questions that are being asked of witnesses in the grand jury. And I got to tell you, I got some, justice goosebumps going the other day when I saw Carol's reporting that in the grand jury, they are asking people, what did Donald Trump say next? What did he do when you told him this? What did he then say to his lawyers? Tell me about his conversations with Mike Pence. Trump, 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 Trump. So what we can say is, in fact, they are investigating Donald Trump's potential criminal culpability for the insurrection. So regardless of what name we put on the grand jury investigation, Donald Trump is being federally investigated by a grand jury.
Okay. I'm very skeptical of the Secret Service. I'm very disappointed in them. I have basically no faith in left. And I hate to say that because I know there are, just like police officers. You got good ones, you got bad ones. But the bad ones get all the press and they heard it for the good ones. And a lot of them stand silent with the, this blue line, and I don't know what the Secret Service calls it, and they don't say anything. I've lost a lot of faith in the Secret Service, especially during the Trump years. The texts that are missing, I personally find it hard to believe that those texts are missing. I think I'm not a conspiracy theory guy for the viewers. That's not my thing. I get sent conspiracy theories every day in my DM. It's not my thing. But I do think that it's very suspicious that they're in this day and age of being able to find things, that they just disappeared. And I always say timing is everything on those particular days. What's your take on the texts?
So first of all, I am not a conspiracy theorist either, but do you know how many conspiracies I investigated, indicted, and prosecuted?
Countless.
Lots of conspiracies out there. They exist. So I am also disappointed. And that's probably an understatement. I worked criminal cases with the Secret Service when I was a federal prosecutor. I happened to work a case in the 90s that involved a senator who had his cell phone stolen. He also had his gold senator's ring stolen. And we used technology to track the thief through the District of Columbia, used cell site technology. I believe it was the first case in DC where we introduced it in court. This was back in the 90s. And we caught the thief, we put him on trial, we convicted him, and the judge sentenced him to prison. So I know the capabilities of the Secret Service. Here's the part that just blows my mind. When I had criminal investigations and the agents seized evidence, cell phone evidence, computer evidence, when we had to have that evidence forensically searched, particularly if the bad guy may have deleted information from his cell phone or his computer, you know where I went? I didn't go to the FBI lab at Quantico, even though they have great abilities down there, and we use that lab for a lot of our forensic work. I went to the United States Secret Service Forensic Sciences Division, because that is the premier agency when it comes to conducting forensic searches of cell phones and computers and retrieving deleted evidence. That capability of the Secret Service does not jive with what we're hearing about the Secret Service being asked to preserve text messages and then deleting them because of some kind of a system change or upgrade, or come on now.
Yeah.
That does not sound kosher to me. So here's the thing. It feels like there's already enough evidence, Brad, to open a criminal probe of what happened here. And if the Secret Service did nothing wrong, they should welcome that criminal probe, because the FBI, if they conduct a thorough investigation of what happened, will conclude that the Secret Service did nothing wrong. So the Secret Service should welcome that kind of scrutiny, and they'll be exonerated if they did nothing wrong.
I got to hit you back on that talking point, because the last thing that you said, I absolutely agree. I feel the same way with the police. I think transparency, if you're not guilty of anything, we'll release the camera footage. I understand, you have to go through a process. I get it. It's not as fast as everybody would like things to be. But I say the same thing with a lot of police investigations. If there's nothing to hide, I never agree with defund the police. Worst slogan Democrats ever came up with. We need police. And a good police officer, I've said on my show, is a hero. A bad one is a bad one is a bad one, period. And I'm not going to cover up for them. I'm not going to say they did great things and not speak out against them. What you just said, if they get exonerated, then they get exonerated. It's like, it's as simplistic as Trump with the tax returns. If you were getting beat up every single day on your tax returns, just release them, because you got nothing to hide. But you know the deal. And I absolutely agree with you. Okay, the next talking point, I'm going to be a little sarcastic. And I do declare that this person who I'm going to ask you about was the one that said a certain former president was bad for the country. He's xenophobic, homophobic, and he'll get our troops killed overseas with his Muslim rhetoric back in 2016. He's the same one that said about justices, you can use my words against me. And then, of course, when we used his words against him, I do declare that he came back and changed his words, because he's full of crap. So what I want to ask you about, because I think I saw some tweets about it on your page. Good old Lindsey Graham, who's given aid and comfort, in your words, to an insurrectionist, Donald Trump, and he's got the nerve to say that Donald Trump is good for America. Go for it.
Yeah, Lindsey Graham is an embarrassment as a public official. He's an embarrassment as a military officer. It's appalling that somebody who has such little conscience, such little ethics, such little regard for the safety of the American people, that he would endorse a chief insurrectionist, Donald Trump, and say he is what America needs. He who launched an armed attack against the Capitol, who put the lives of everybody in that building in danger, and then he hid in his little private dining room for 3 hours, refusing to send reinforcements to protect the people in the Capitol. Mike Pence had to give the order, whether it was lawful or not. Who cares? I'm glad he did. This is who Lindsey Graham says should head up our government again, maybe to finish the job, maybe to turn us into a full autocracy. This, again, blows my mind. I don't understand this. I don't understand any of this. So Lindsey Graham has been subpoenaed to the grand jury in Georgia. Why? Because he was trying to help Trump overturn the results of the presidential election. And here's why Lindsey Graham is so scared of testifying before the grand jury down in Georgia. He's fighting it tooth and nail, making every argument from separation of powers to sovereign immunity to speech and debate to the dog ate my subpoena. Okay, I made that last one up, but that one is as persuasive as all the others. He was on 2 phone calls with Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. Brad Raffensperger's take on that call is that Lindsey Graham, and he said this publicly, it sounded like Lindsey Graham was urging me to toss out legally cast ballots. With testimony like that, Brad, from the other person on that phone call, that gives Lindsey Graham a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, because Brad Raffensperger, his interpretation of the call is that Lindsey was trying to solicit election fraud. This is why I believe Graham so desperately is trying to avoid being placed under oath and having to testify, because if he was smart, he'd plead the Fifth, and pleading the Fifth does not look good for a sitting United States senator.
And I agree with you. And I know you saw the clip that Ron Filkowski put out, or you probably did, where he was being interviewed. And this talking point probably comes from that clip with the lady where thought he was so funny. Yeah, I like Trump and he likes him too, or was something, some corn. It was actually a funny line, but it's not funny. It's funny, but it's not funny. Yeah. You just said something, a military officer. All of these things that Lindsey Graham was, and I got to add something to it, and I know you're well aware of this, but I want to add it for the viewers because there's so much in Trump world that people forget. Lindsey Graham was friends with Hillary Clinton, and they did a tour. Hillary Clinton, I believe it was Hillary Clinton, John McCain, and Lindsey Graham. I believe it was the 3 of them. But at a minimum, he was friendly with Hillary Clinton. So Trump comes along, and you can have a difference. I always tell people, politics is one thing, keep them separate. But loyalty and friendship are another thing. He threw her completely under the bus, let Trump say the most vile things about her that were above and beyond political. But I want to make a point about John McCain because you said about his service. If you remember, Glenn, Lieberman, McCain, and Graham were supposed to be the 3 amigos, the 3 musketeers, thick as thieves, best of friends. When McCain died and Trump had the flag raised back up, and all of the horrible things that he said, about war hero not being captured. And Lindsey has the audacity to say yesterday or the day before that whatever that thing, and that was insulting that Trump came to DC. He had no business there. He had no regard for the Capitol Police or anything. That was, as you know, on purpose to stick his thumb and piss everybody off to show him that he could do what he wants to do. The fact that Lindsey doesn't even take up for his friend John McCain with him is disgusting to me. That says it all. It's like I said, political parties is one thing. That right there defines Lindsey Graham to me. And I'm going to say this, I'm not asking you to condone what I'm saying or agree with what I'm saying. I personally feel I cannot prove it, but I do personally feel that Lindsey Graham is a member of the LGBTQ community. I can't say 100%, but what I will say to that talking point is this. If it comes out and there's unequivocal proof that Lindsey is part, I know there's been rumors and reporting, and I'm not saying it's 100% true, but if it comes out that he was, and he stood against the community when he had the platform and being a senator to help the LGBT community, which would bring people into his party, like the guy the other day, I'm sure you saw that story, that went to his son's same-sex marriage, but he voted against the same-sex bill, or whatever it was. The point I'm making is the hypocrisy of this man. So I agree with Lindsey, and it's disgusting that he would agree with Trump and say that he's friends with him. It's above and beyond. The other talking point I want you up on is the smoking gun proof of Trump's criminal intent in the testimony of Donahue. Talk about that if you would.
This is so powerful, Brad. The people who continue to say it's so difficult to prove Donald Trump's criminal intent, I would respond with, I did it for 30 years in courtrooms. I was a trial court prosecutor. I never wanted to climb the bureaucratic ladder at the Department of Justice because I knew what I loved to do. What I love to do is try cases, murder cases, RICO cases. I was chief of homicide, so I was a supervisor, but I always tried cases with my junior prosecutors throughout my supervisory years, 10 of them at the U.S. Attorney's Office. But I never wanted to climb any higher than that. For 30 years, I proved the criminal intent of defendants with far less evidence than we have against Donald Trump. You prove criminal intent with circumstantial evidence, not direct evidence. Direct evidence would be, Brad, let me tell you that I'm about to rob a bank, and I just want to go on record as saying I have criminal intent before I launch this caper. So you can testify about that in the future and prove my criminal intent with my own words. That's not how any of this works. You use circumstantial evidence. You watch their conduct. You listen to their statements. And then you assess what their intent was. Was it mistaken? Was it accidental? Was it intentional? Everything Donald Trump does is intentional. And when Richard Donahue, a high Department of Justice official, testified under oath that Donald Trump said, I don't care if the election was not fraudulent, just say it was and leave the rest to me and my Republican allies in Congress. Brad, that's actually direct evidence out of the orange horse's mouth himself of his criminal intent. Done. Proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Even my old boss, Eric Holder, after that, sent out a series of tweets saying anybody who, after hearing that evidence, maintains that you can't prove Donald Trump's criminal intent would be laughed out of court. And lest anybody forget, Eric Holder, on whose shoulders I stand. Am I biased? Yes, I am. He first made me a federal prosecutor. Before he became the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, my boss, he was a judge in Superior Court in Washington, D.C. You know who appointed him to the bench? President Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. So, yes, in these days of hyper-partisanship, let's not forget where he came from. He had respect on both sides of the aisle and was appointed as a judge by one of the right's, high deities, Ronald Reagan. So come on now, a novice prosecutor can prove Donald Trump's corrupt intent in her sleep, and I hope we get the chance to do it.
Okay. A couple of things I want to ask you as well. And maybe I'm not seeing it when I'm reading articles. I try to really keep up with everything. There's a lot to keep up with. These people that are getting charged and sent to jail for breaking into the Capitol on January 6th, are they getting charged with restitution for all the damage when you see him smash? Like the Italian guy, I forget his name, with the beard that smashed out the window. It was him that smashed the window. I know they may not be able to prove exactly what damage, but that guy, he broke out a window. That window has a cost.
There are some people who are being adjudged fines as part of their sentences. There probably is some restitution being ordered. Here's the thing. Most of these defendants have very shallow pockets. They probably don't even have the means to pay much of a fine or to pay much in restitution. But let me touch on these Trump supporters for a minute, because there's a deep inequity and injustice going on in our nation right now. These people were summoned to the Capitol on January 6th by Donald Trump. They weren't coming to DC on January 6th to have a wild time. Donald Trump told them to. Donald Trump lied to them, duped them, deceived them into believing their vote was stolen, their election was stolen, their president was stolen. And he said, there is only one thing for you to do right now. Go to the Capitol, fight like hell or you won't have a country anymore. Stop the certification, stop the steal. And they obeyed his command. And they're being prosecuted, they're being convicted, and they're being imprisoned. But the person who gave the order, who orchestrated this violent attack on the Capitol so he could retain power, is not only out golfing footloose and fancy free, he's holding hate rallies and he's lying to a new batch of future insurrectionists. That is a stain on what should be the pursuit of equal justice in this country. And that's why I'm so furious that Donald Trump has not been held accountable and has been allowed by the Department of Justice to put a whole nother batch of people in danger. I lead with empathy when it comes to the people who attacked the Capitol on Donald Trump's command, because some of them, Brad, let's face it, are not critical thinkers. Maybe they don't know any better. And when they hear their president say your vote was stolen and you have to go attack the Capitol, they think they're patriots. They think they're doing what their president told them to do. Not a defense to their crimes, but it's a deep injustice that they're being punished and Donald Trump is not, at least not yet.
I hear you with that talking point, Glenn, but these same people, and I don't condone, and I say this on my show, when Black Lives Matter, you had some people that infiltrated, which was proven, factual. You also had some people that did not act accordingly and within Black Lives Matter, and you had destruction of property and stuff like that. I don't condone any of that. People like to say, well, you're okay with, because they always, if you say the insurrection, they say summer Black Lives Matter. It's always a comparison. Okay. I don't condone destruction, violence on either side. But the same people that we're saying empathy for and that were duped would be the first ones, because a lot of them are racist, would say, but the Black people, which really there's a lot of white people in Black Lives Matter too, but they're not critical thinkers to see this. They only see the word Black, and whenever we put Black in front of something, it's a problem. They wouldn't be sympathetic or have empathy for any of what Black Lives Matter is protesting for and what they're doing. And I have issue with that, because Donald Trump doesn't care. You watch his supporters, all they do is down Black. They don't try to understand anything. I said this before when it happened in the moment. He had a watershed moment with Colin Kaepernick. Whether you agree with him taking a knee or not, I do agree with him. I was in the military and it didn't offend me. But he had a watershed moment where he could have brought Colin and people on the other side, reasonable people, there's the word I'm using, reasonable, to the White House and had a summit and talk about he didn't do that because he didn't care. He came out and said he's a son of a bitch and he should be fired and so on and so on. And they cheered him on because they saw race and they could care less. So I do hear you. I don't completely agree with that, but I understand where you're coming from with that. I respect your opinion.
I get the point that you're making. Let me boil it down to this. If a rich man orders a poor man to rob the bank, you hold both of them accountable. You don't just lock up the poor man and let the rich man go free. That boiled down to its essence is what we are experiencing. I'm not excusing what they did. I'm saying there's a deep injustice in Donald Trump not being held accountable. And
I absolutely agree with you. Wisconsin Assembly Speaker Robin Vos, I think it's VOS, that he called, and he tried to overturn whatever. There was a ruling, I guess, in Wisconsin. I don't know if it was the Supreme Court or whatever it was. Trump called him on the phone a week or two ago, and he was interviewed about it. Is there anything that could be done about that? I mean, here we go with him calling people again.
Yeah, and I'm actually flipping through my notes here because another really good data point is the fact that subpoenas are being issued to federal grand jury subpoenas are being issued to state legislators investigating, and I'm going to quote from the subpoena that was issued recently to one of the Arizona state legislators looking into the fake elector scheme. Here is what was ordered to be produced under that subpoena. Any documents and communications to, from, and with any member, employee, or agent of Donald J. Trump. That's another data point that informs my conclusion that the Department of Justice is investigating all up in Donald Trump's business right now. And the other thing is they have been for some time, because grand jury is secret by law. Prosecutors can't talk about what goes on there. I wasn't even permitted to confirm or deny that anybody had appeared in front of the grand jury, never mind what testimony they gave. Agents, detectives, and investigators are prohibited from disclosing it. The grand jurors are prohibited from disclosing it. You know, the only people that are allowed to talk about what goes on in the grand jury are the witnesses. That's why I think Carol Leonnig, doing her thing as a great investigative journalist, is probably talking to Mark Short and Greg Jacob. These are the top aides to Mike Pence, who appeared before the grand jury recently. And I think that's how she's figuring out what's being said in the grand jury investigating Donald Trump. But the other thing that I think is an important data point that reinforces that DOJ has been dug way into this for a long time. We just learned that they got Mark Meadows' cell phone records with a federal grand jury subpoena back in April. We didn't know anything about that. And one of the reasons that's so sweet is because who was communicating with Mark Meadows on his cell phone, trying to urge him to overturn the election's results? Ginny Thomas, among others, right? So Ginny Thomas, she may want to be less concerned about getting a J6 committee subpoena and more concerned about getting a federal grand jury subpoena. So listen, DOJ is digging in. It's taken too long. They're a little too slow, in my opinion and experience, but they're digging in now. And I think they're going to also dig into the fake elector schemes in all of the states where that was going on. And here's the other thing. Those are state crimes too. You know, we all turn to Fani Willis, right? Our lonely eyes turn to Georgia and Fani Willis looking for some justice for Trump's crimes. She's not the only DA,
right,
state DA, that ought to be investigating this stuff hard, because he did it in 6 or 7 states.
But I'm going to use your words. You always said, but who's going to be the first, right? Isn't that? Exactly. And then everybody else jumps on board. You've said that on my show multiple times. Who's going to be the first one? Because once the first one does it, like you say, then other people are going to do it. Right. So, I mean, doesn't it boil down to that?
It does. I've said over and over again that no prosecutor wants to be the first one to charge a former president, because it's never been done before. Everybody's going to want to be the second one to charge a former president. Then it's going to be like, look, he committed crimes in my backyard. He solicited election fraud in my state. Right. I need to go after him too. Right. Somebody's got to have the spine, the determination, yes, the bravery to, because listen, there's no such thing as a sure winner. There's no bulletproof case. Right. So there will be risks attendant with trying Donald Trump for his crimes, but there is no shame in bringing a case and losing. There's nothing but shame in refusing to bring a case that's supported by the evidence for fear of losing. That's the difference.
And I agree with you. And that's what caused agita for me. And I kind of lost respect for Lester Holt in his interview with Merrick Garland, because I didn't like when Lester Holt said, well, if he gets indicted, it'll tear the country's already torn apart. The country. So if we let him off, and like you said, try it. If he doesn't get indicted and they did their best and they use all of the stuff and he walks, it sucks. It does. I won't be happy. You won't be happy. Most Americans that love this country and know what he is won't be happy. But it happens. I would rather him be brought up and tried and not convicted if it happens than him just walk away and run again in 2024 or whatever he does, or go and golf, because average Joe Q public will be brought up on charges and tried. And I always say, you, me, anybody else are not above the law. And he's not either.
And here's the thing. There's zero deterrent value if you never charge the guy. Every single future candidate for president will have license to do what Donald Trump just did. And they'll be able to say, you know what? The Department of Justice co-signed everything I did, because if Donald Trump had committed a crime when he launched an attack on the Capitol, then Merrick Garland would have charged him with a crime. He didn't, so I get to do it all over again. And like you say, Brett, I don't care win, lose, or draw. More important to try cases than to win cases. Why? Because if you try a righteous case, Donald Trump is going to be in court defending himself for the next 2, 3, 4 years, even if the jury hangs because they can't reach a unanimous verdict, or they just flat out acquit him, find him not guilty. Other politicians who are contemplating the same crimes that Donald Trump was tried for will not want to sit in court for 2, 3, 4 years defending themselves. And frankly, their verdict might not be quite as advantageous as Trump's verdict was if Trump doesn't get convicted. So it still has deterrent value. Win, lose, or draw, you have to try Donald Trump for his crimes.
Okay. You had great coverage of Steve Bannon. Kudos to you. He was convicted, 2 charges he got convicted of? For the viewers, what's the minimum maximum he could get?
So he was charged with 2 counts of contempt of Congress, one for violating a subpoena for documents and evidence that he was required to produce, and a second for violating a subpoena for testimony. He just thumbed his nose at Congress, blew it off, boasted about it on social media, and they introduced his social media posts into evidence against him. I sat through the whole trial, start to finish. So, it was kind of like shooting fish in the barrel on the evidence that the prosecutors had. Now, they did a remarkable job. And let me add that, we heap a lot of criticism on the Department of Justice. This prosecution team did a remarkable job. Amanda Vaughn and Molly Gaston. Remember the names of those 2 assistant United States attorneys who did a remarkable job prosecuting Steve Bannon. We, the people, were extremely well represented by those 2 prosecutors. So the punishment that's involved, each count that he was convicted of carries a maximum imprisonment term of 1 year and what's called a mandatory minimum of 30 days. What that means is the judge can't give him 29 days. The judge has to start at 30 days for openers, then he can go up as high as 1 year. And because there are 2 charges, technically he could get 60 days mandatory minimum and as much as 2 years. But here's the thing. The judge has discretion to run the 2 sentences together, what we call concurrent, instead of consecutive, running them apart. So the bottom line is he's facing at least 30 days in jail and as much as 2 years.
Okay. One of the last things I want to ask you about, and I don't know if it could be proven treason, but when I listen to Trump, you mentioned earlier hate rallies, I call them Hitler rallies. We've never, in at least our age group, I should say ever, really, in the advent of TV and even radio and Franklin D. Roosevelt's days and Hoover and all of those President Coolidge, we never had an ex-president from either party act like he has done since the day he got on his thing and insulted Frank Sinatra and played My Way when hardly anybody showed up, and he got on the plane with his wife and he took off because he couldn't go to the inauguration, norms. So all the lies that he continues to spew, not just the big lie with the stealing because he's grifting and making money off of it, but all the other things in a third world country or a dictatorship. I'm not advocating violence. I'm not saying this. I'm prefacing with this, but the truth is the truth. In another country, if he was an ex-president with a dictator, he would be taken out. Period. They'd assassinate him, or the president would have him assassinated. My question is this: all the type of stuff that he says, is there any case in using his own words, what he says on Truth Social, what he says at these Hitler rallies, what he says at Mar-a-Lago, to get a case on that stuff since January 22nd, I think, or 21st, when he flew off in a plane, for treason?
Every word he says is admissible evidence against him, as a statement of a party opponent. That's a specific exception to the hearsay rule. Everything a defendant says can be introduced at trial to prove he committed crimes. I believe Trump committed treason. The reason I believe that is because the federal code defines treason as whoever, owing allegiance to the United States, levies war against them, the United States, or gives aid and comfort, but I'm going to leave that part out, is guilty of treason. He owes an allegiance to the United States by virtue of taking the oath as president to protect and defend the Constitution, to faithfully execute the laws of the country. And I maintain he levied war against the United States. Why do I say that? Because we know that he recruited his shock troops to come to DC on January 6th, will be wild. We know he was briefed that morning that some of his supporters were armed with rifles, pistols, and other deadly weapons. To that, he said, take the metal detectors down because they're not here to hurt me. I would argue that to the jury as a clear admission that he knew they were there to hurt the people in the Capitol who were certifying the win of his opponent. He said, take the metal detectors down, let them in, and then we will all march to the Capitol together. And then he used this inflammatory rhetoric to launch the attack. And then for 3 hours, Brad, he sat in his little private dining room. People streamed in begging him to call off the attack. He refused to call off the attack. He poured gasoline on the fire by saying Mike Pence didn't have the courage to protect the country. And he refused to send reinforcements to the Capitol. Let's compare just for a minute the way the federal government responded to the BLM protests in Washington, D.C. We had every executive branch law enforcement agency known to man, and some that weren't known to man because they were unmarked. Every single law enforcement agency known to man was there to protect, to keep the peace, right? Including right up to and including the Bureau of Prisons riot squad, which I had never seen deployed outside of a prison riot in my 30 years as a Fed, right? So what then happened on January 6th? There was not a single federal executive branch law enforcement agency allowed to go protect the Capitol. He set the Capitol up for failure. You know, if you think back to the very first J6 public hearing, it was a long time ago, and they had police officers testifying.
I remember.
Who testified? Members of the Capitol Police, because that's the only law enforcement agency under the control of Congress, not under the control of the executive branch, and the Metropolitan Police Department. Those are my local partners in crime fighting in DC, under the control of Mayor Bowser, the city government. There was not a single damn executive branch, law enforcement agency, or military component sent to the Capitol to protect those people. That was an orchestration by Donald Trump. What he did was he levied war against the United States, against the peaceful transfer of power, against our very democracy. I would be in the grand jury developing all the evidence in support of a charge of treason. That's the granddaddy of all crimes against the nation. You know, yes, we've got inciting an insurrection. We've got a 371 conspiracy to defraud the United States. We've got inciting an armed riot. We've got obstructing an official proceeding. We may have a seditious conspiracy, but we also have treason. And so, yes, I think Donald Trump is potentially on the hook for treason.
So, right. But back to my original talking point, I agree with everything that you said about in that January 6th, but I'm saying since he got on that plane, they played My Way and he flew off with the wife, all the stuff that he's done, he's never acknowledged the police officers. He didn't come back for the memorial. I mean, I know that's not something you can go to prison for, but all the extra stuff that he's done, he's downplayed January 6th. He still wants to say Nancy Pelosi, which is not true, could have sent the National Guard. I'm talking about all of the statements and all the stuff that he's doing as an ex-president. Can any of that stuff, that daily rhetoric that he uses, can any of that be added to a treason case? On
It is,
top of that,
it's all admissible evidence
okay,
that can be introduced to prove all of the crimes Donald Trump committed. Now, he doesn't arguably owe an allegiance to the United States now. So, you can't really use that conduct to say what he's doing at this moment constitutes treason. But what you can do is say he is still involved in a conspiracy
yes,
to defraud and commit crimes against the United States by continuing to push the big lie on the next batch of insurrectionists he's trying to recruit. So yes, all of this is still evidence of his crimes that can be used against him. I just think the treason cutoff for purposes of using evidence against him specifically for treason does kind of end when he no longer holds public office. Therefore, he no longer has an allegiance to the United States under the law.
okay. Last talking point I want to ask you, and I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse or not. Brittney Griner with the trading of a possible Russian arms dealer. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, my heart breaks for everybody who is detained in Russia. Because we don't negotiate with terrorists or hostage takers, it's a complex issue. But here's where I come down on it. No matter what we do or don't do as a government or as a nation, this is my own personal opinion. No matter what we do when it comes to trying to win the release of people who are being detained by despotic governments like Russia, they will continue to unlawfully detain our people if our people continue to go there. So I say by any means necessary, let's bring them home, because whether we negotiate with Russia or not, Russia will continue to be a bad actor. So I don't think our decision to negotiate with terrorists or hostage takers impacts the way they behave moving forward. So let's do everything we can to try to bring them home.
And well, I'm going to throw one more thing at you on that note. You know that we've had ex-presidents. I think President Carter might have been one of them. It comes to my mind. I don't know 100%, have been involved in. And I know Muhammad Ali went over to, I think, Iraq and got some, I think, Americans under Saddam
Clinton
Hussein.
went over to North Korea too.
Okay, Clinton, right. Could you see as a political ploy them not negotiating with the Biden administration? You know him, Trump and Putin are best buddies, pals. Him talking to Trump somehow doing something to look like the hero and bringing them home.
Wow, I hadn't thought of that. I don't think Trump has it in him to do anything that could be perceived as humanitarian. I don't think Trump has it in him.
I'm saying politically.
I know. I don't. No. It would all be a ruse. It would be a game.
Yes,
it would be to build Putin up and knock Joe Biden down. But here's the thing. I don't think you can, even as a ruse, I don't think you can convince Donald Trump to do it, because it would be perceived as doing some good for humanity. And Donald Trump, even if it's in his own self-interest, the man will do nothing that's good for humanity. So I don't see him entering this arena.
Okay. I'll give you final thought. Anything else you want to put out before we close out today?
No, just keep fighting, because, I feel like, with the Bannon convictions and with what we see now going on in the grand jury, where they're going hard after the evidence of Donald Trump's crimes, I feel like we kind of dipped our beak in a little bit of justice. It's a little wet right now. And I just think we have to keep at it, keep punching and fighting, particularly for those who can't. And I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic with some of this recent reporting. So I would say just keep doing what you're doing as well, my friend. Just keep fighting for justice and for humanity.
All right. I appreciate it. I don't know if you still have it, but don't you have an event next month for Justice Matters? Aren't you?
I do, but it's a patrons only thing. So
okay.
I don't put it out there.
Okay. I'm always about plugging good things. All right. On that note, hey, I appreciate you coming on today, Glenn. Thank you so much. And we'll talk soon, my brother.
All right, Brad. Good to be with you.
Hey, folks, that's another episode of the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show on the Ringside Report Web TV channel. The one, the only, Glenn Kirschner. Love having him on the show. He puts it in ways that you can understand it. He doesn't use $500 words. And he's your everyday man with a lot of passion and knowledge. And these are the type of guests that I like to have on the show, even for recaps of hot topics, because you, the viewers, tell me that these are the type of shows that you really like as follow-ups to their 360 conversations and their moving humanity forward panels, because Glenn was also on one of those. So make sure you subscribe to my channel. Make sure you retweet this. If you leave comments on the video, I always personally respond. And I thank each and every one of my supporters on Twitter and that follow my channel and follow my show, subscribe. Thank you so very, very much, because it really is all about moving humanity forward for this guy. All right. And on that note, remember, folks, every act of kindness is a little love we leave behind. Bad Brad out. Thank you for watching the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show. Please follow, subscribe, leave comments, forget about it, and move humanity forward.